The weeks after finding out the truth were some of the strangest weeks of my life. People always talk about betrayal like it's one single moment. Like there is 1 second where you discover the truth, everything makes sense, and then you move on. That's not how it works. The moment you find out someone has been lying to you is only the beginning. The real damage happens afterward. It's waking up the next morning and remembering the person you trusted most was not who you thought they were. It's walking through your home and seeing memories everywhere. It's looking at pictures on your phone and wondering if the person smiling next to you was feeling the same thing you were feeling, or if you're the only one experiencing those moments. After leaving the restaurant that night, I drove home completely numb. I don't even remember most of the drive. I remember sitting in my car outside my apartment for almost 20 minutes before going inside. I just sat there staring at the front door. That was the place where I had spent the last year building what I thought was my future. The place where Alyssa and I cooked dinner together. The place where we watched movies. The place where we talked about what our life would look like years from now. And suddenly it didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a place where someone had been pretending. When I finally walked inside, everything looked exactly the same. Her jacket was still hanging by the door. Her coffee mug was still sitting in the cabinet. Her pictures were still on the wall. It was almost disturbing how normal everything looked. My entire relationship had fallen apart, but the apartment didn't know that. The next morning, Alyssa called me. I didn't answer. She called again, then again. Eventually, she started sending messages. At first, they were apologies, then explanations, then messages asking me to give her a chance to explain everything. I ignored all of them, not because I was trying to punish her. I just genuinely didn't know what I could say. What do you even say to someone who spent years creating an entire second life? How do you have a normal conversation with someone who you no longer know? A few days later, she came to the apartment. I was actually surprised when I saw her. Not because she was there, because part of me expected her to avoid me completely. But she stood outside the door, looking upset. She told me she just wanted to talk. I almost didn't let her in. Honestly, I probably shouldn't have. But after 3 years together, turning someone away completely is harder than people realize. I let her inside. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. And for the first time since I met her, we talked like strangers. She started by saying she knew what she did was wrong. She said she wasn't going to make excuses. But then, almost immediately, she started making excuses. She told me our relationship had been difficult at times. She said she felt like we had lost the connection we used to have. She said she met Nathan during a period where she felt lonely. I listened, but something about it bothered me. Not because relationships don't go through difficult periods. They do. Every relationship has problems. Every couple has moments where things feel less exciting. But the answer to those problems is not secretly starting another relationship. The answer is communication. Alyssa wasn't describing a mistake. She was describing a choice she made over and over again. She told me that at first, she didn't expect things with Nathan to become serious. She said she thought it would end quickly, but then it didn't. Then she found herself attached. Then she became afraid of losing either relationship. That was the part one couldn't understand. She wasn't afraid of losing me. If she was, she would have told the truth. She was afraid of losing the life she had created. There was a difference. I asked her something that had been bothering me since the restaurant. Did you ever actually love me? She looked down. That question seemed to affect her more than anything else I asked. After a long silence, she said yes. And I believe she believed that. But hearing it didn't make me feel better. Because sometimes someone can have feelings for you and still hurt you in ways you never imagined. Love doesn't automatically make someone's actions acceptable. A few weeks later, I learned more about how deep the deception went. Nathan contacted me again. At first, I almost didn't answer. I didn't want to keep thinking about Alyssa. I wanted to move on. But when I answered, he told me something strange. He had found out Alyssa wasn't completely honest with him either. Apparently, after their confrontation, she had told him things that didn't match what she told me. She had given each of us slightly different versions of events. Not completely different, just enough to make herself look better. That was when we both realized something. Even after getting caught, she was still trying to control the story. She was still editing the truth. Nathan told me She claimed she had planned to break things off with him before we found out. I laughed when he said that. Not because it was funny, because it was such a predictable thing to say. I had heard similar things. I was going to tell you. I didn't know how. I was scared. Maybe some of those statements were true. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she didn't know how to end it. But fear doesn't erase responsibility. At some point, a person has to decide what kind of person they want to be. And Alyssa made her choice. For almost 2 years. The hardest part of the whole situation wasn't losing the relationship. It was losing my understanding of reality. I started thinking about all the moments I had trusted her. The little things. The normal things. I wondered if I'd been ignoring signs because I loved her, or if she was genuinely just that good at hiding things. Eventually, I started talking to my friends and family about what happened. Their reactions were interesting. Some people were angry immediately. They wanted me to hate her. They wanted me to see her as completely evil. But I couldn't do that. Not because I forgave her. I didn't. But because real people are complicated. Someone can have good qualities and still do terrible things. Someone can make you happy and still destroy your trust. That's one of the hardest things to accept about betrayal. The person who hurts you is rarely a complete stranger. They're usually someone you cared about, someone you defended, someone you trusted. About 2 months after everything happened, I ran into Alyssa unexpectedly. I was at a grocery store near my apartment. I was walking down one of the aisles when I saw her. For a second, neither of us moved. It was strange seeing someone who had been such a huge part of my life suddenly become someone I didn't know. She looked like she wanted to say something. I could tell, but neither of us approached the other. Eventually, she walked away, and honestly, I was relieved because I realized there was nothing she could say that would change what happened. There was no explanation that would give me those years back. No apology that would make the memories feel the same. No conversation that would make me trust her again. A few months later, I moved out of the apartment. I didn't do it because I couldn't handle being there. I did it because I wanted a fresh start. I didn't want every room to remind me of a different lie. The move was actually one of the best things I did. A new place, a new routine, a chance to rebuild. Looking back now, I don't think Alyssa was a mastermind. I don't think she planned every detail from the beginning. I think she made one bad choice, then another, and eventually she created a life built entirely around avoiding the consequences of those choices. That's what made the situation so disturbing. It wasn't one moment of weakness. It was years of decisions. Years of waking up every day and choosing not to tell the truth. I've thought about Nathan a lot since everything happened. It's strange. A person I never would have met became someone who helped me through one of the worst experiences of my life. We don't talk often anymore. Life moved on, but every once in a while, we check in. Not about Alyssa, not about what happened, just normal conversations. Because despite the horrible situation that brought us together, we both came out of it understanding something important. The person we were angry at wasn't each other. It was the person who made us believe we were living two completely different realities. The biggest lesson I learned from everything is that trust is important. You can't have a healthy relationship without it. But trust doesn't mean ignoring everything. It doesn't mean accepting every explanation just because you love someone. There is a difference between trusting someone and refusing to see the truth. I don't think Alyssa ruined my ability to trust people, but she definitely changed the way I approach relationships. Now I pay attention, not because I expect everyone to lie, but because I understand that people are capable of hiding things you never thought they would hide. The scary thing about betrayal isn't just finding out someone lied. It's realizing how easily a person can become a stranger while still standing right in front of you. And sometimes the person you think you know better than anyone is the person you never truly knew at all. The next few weeks were when everything started changing. I wish I could say there was one obvious moment where I realized what was happening. One single event where everything clicked. But that's not how it happened. The worst situations usually don't happen all at once. They build slowly. They happen through dozens of small moments that you ignore because each one individually doesn't seem important enough. That was exactly what happened with Marcus. After I found out Emily had been talking to him about our arguments, I started paying closer attention. Not because I wanted to spy on them. Not because I suddenly thought they were doing something horrible. I just couldn't shake the feeling that something about the situation wasn't right. The first thing I noticed was how often Marcus was messaging Emily. I wasn't looking through her phone. I wasn't checking her conversations. I wasn't trying to find evidence. It was just becoming obvious. Whenever we were sitting together watching television, her phone would light up. She would look down, smile, and respond. Again, that isn't automatically suspicious. People have friends. People talk. But eventually I noticed a pattern. Almost every time she received a message from Marcus, she would turn her phone away. Not dramatically. Not like someone trying to hide something. Just enough that I noticed. One night, we were eating dinner, and her phone buzzed. She immediately picked it up. I saw Marcus's name on the screen. She typed something quickly, then placed the phone face down. I didn't say anything, but something inside me sank. A few days later, Marcus invited me over to watch a game. Normally, I would have been excited. That was our thing. Every few weeks, we would hang out, order food, and watch sports. But this time felt different. Maybe because I was already suspicious. Maybe because I was starting to see things I ignored before. When I arrived, Marcus immediately started asking about Emily. Not me, not work, not anything else. Just Emily. How are things with her? I remember laughing awkwardly. Why do you always ask that? He looked confused. What do you mean? You always want to know how things are with Emily. He smiled. I care about you, man. That answer would have worked if it came from anyone else. But coming from him, it felt strange. I changed the subject. We watched the game. But the whole night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days later, something happened that made me question everything. I came home from work earlier than expected. Emily wasn't home. I texted her asking where she was. She replied that she was grabbing coffee with a friend. I didn't think much of it. Then about 20 minutes later, I saw a notification pop up on our shared tablet. It was connected to the same account she used on her phone. A message preview appeared. It was from Marcus. The message said, "Don't worry. I handled it." I stared at those words. I don't even know why. Maybe because they didn't make sense. Handled what? Why was Marcus saying that? I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was wrong. But at that moment, my curiosity got the better of me. I opened the conversation and immediately wished I hadn't. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. There weren't hundreds of messages. There wasn't some obvious confession. It was worse, because it looked normal. That was the most disturbing part. They had been talking for months. Not about random things. About me. About my relationship. About our arguments. About my personality. Marcus had been telling Emily things like I was too immature. That I didn't appreciate her enough. That she deserved someone who understood her. And Emily wasn't shutting it down. She was responding. At first, I tried to convince myself it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe they were just talking. Maybe Marcus was trying to help. Maybe I was misunderstanding. Then I saw a message from Emily. She wrote, "Sometimes I wonder if you're right." I felt sick. Not angry. Not at first. Just completely empty. Because the person I trusted most had been slowly planting doubts in my relationship. And the person I loved was listening. I kept scrolling. The conversation went back months. Marcus had apparently been telling her that he always thought we weren't a good match. That he didn't understand why she stayed with me. That he thought she was settling. Then I saw something that completely changed how I viewed everything. A message from Marcus. He said, "If you ever decide you want someone who actually understands you, you know who to call." I remember sitting there staring at the screen, because suddenly every strange comment made sense. Every time he questioned my relationship, every time he took her side, every time he made me feel like I wasn't good enough. It wasn't advice. It wasn't concern. It was intentional. He was trying to create problems between us. I put the tablet down. I didn't confront Emily immediately. I know some people might think that's strange, but my mind was completely overwhelmed. I needed time to process what I had just seen. The hardest part wasn't even what Marcus did. It was realizing that Emily allowed it. Because someone can try to interfere in your relationship. That happens. But the person you love has to let them in. They have to participate. And that's what hurt the most. That night, Emily came home around an hour later. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "What's going on?" I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just asked, "How long have you been talking to Marcus about our relationship?" Her expression changed. Only slightly. But enough. She knew. At first, she denied it. She said they were just friends. She said she was only venting. She said I was making it into something it wasn't. I asked her why Marcus thought he had the right to tell her she deserved someone better. She didn't answer. I asked her why she never told me he was saying those things. Still nothing. Eventually, she sat down, and that's when she admitted something that hurt even more. She said Marcus had always made her feel understood. She said he listened when she was upset. She said she knew he cared about her. I remember asking, "Do you hear yourself?" Because that's when I realized how far things had gone. She wasn't just defending him. She was emotionally attached to him. Maybe there had been no physical cheating. Maybe they never crossed that line. But the trust was already broken. I left that night. I stayed with my brother for a few days. I needed space. I needed to figure out what I was feeling. And during those few days, Marcus called me repeatedly. I ignored him. Eventually, he sent me a message. It said, "You're misunderstanding everything." I almost laughed when I saw it, because that's exactly what people say when they know they've been caught. I finally answered. I asked him one question. "Why were you trying to convince my girlfriend to leave me?" There was a long pause. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "Because I knew she wasn't happy." That answer made me angry. Not because he cared about her, because he genuinely believed he had the right. I asked him, "And what exactly did you think was going to happen?" He didn't answer, but I think we both knew. He wanted to be the person she went to, the person she trusted, the person she depended on. He didn't want to help my relationship. He wanted to replace me. I eventually ended things with Emily. That was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. Not because I thought she was perfect. She wasn't. But because losing her also meant losing the future I imagined. We had built a life together. We had plans. And suddenly all of that was gone. As for Marcus, I never spoke to him again. I heard from mutual friends that he tried to explain himself. Some people believed him. Some people thought I overreacted. I honestly stopped caring. Because the people who weren't there don't understand what it feels like to realize someone you trusted spent months trying to slowly destroy something important to you. The strangest part is that Marcus and I have been friends for almost 10 years. 10 years of memories. 10 years of trust. And all it took was one person deciding they wanted something I had. I still think about that sometimes. Not because I miss him, but because it changed how I see people. Before that happened, I believe betrayal was always obvious. I thought you would know when someone was against you. But sometimes the person who causes the most damage is the person standing closest to you. The person giving you advice. The person telling you they care. The person you never think you have to question. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because sometimes the person trying to take something from you isn't a stranger. Sometimes they're the person you invited into your life. Next story. I always thought the hardest part of being cheated on would be finding out. The moment where everything finally makes sense. The moment where you realize the person you trusted was lying to you. I imagined that would be the part that destroyed me. But I was wrong. The hardest part wasn't finding out. The hardest part was realizing how many times I've been given the chance to notice something was wrong. And how many times I convinced myself everything was fine. Because when you love someone, you don't just believe their words. You believe the version of them you have built in your head. And sometimes that version of them is impossible to let go of. My name is Daniel, and this happened when I was 31 years old. At the time, I had been dating my girlfriend Rachel for just over 4 years. We met through mutual friends at a small gathering. Honestly, I almost didn't go. I had just gotten out of a relationship a few months earlier, and I wasn't really interested in dating anyone seriously. I remember telling my friend that I just wanted to go out, have a few drinks, and catch up with people. I wasn't looking for anything. Then Rachel showed up. She wasn't the loudest person in the room. She wasn't trying to get everyone's attention. She was actually sitting on the edge of the group, listening more than talking. For some reason, that stood out to me. We started talking near the kitchen while everyone else was playing games in the living room. The conversation was easy. We talked about movies, travel, family, and random things that didn't really matter. But somehow, we ended up talking for almost 2 hours. Before she left that night, she gave me her number. The next day, I texted her. A few months later, we were officially together. Looking back, Our relationship seemed almost too normal, and I mean that in the best way possible. There was no constant drama, no major fights, no breaking up and getting back together. We were just comfortable. She was the person I wanted to tell things to. If something funny happened at work, she was the first person I messaged. If I had a bad day, she knew before anyone else. We had routines. Every Friday night, we would order food and watch something together. Every Sunday morning, we would go get coffee from the same place near our apartment. We had conversations about the future. Not vague conversations either. Real ones, where we wanted to live, whether we wanted kids, what kind of house we would buy someday. At some point, marriage became less of a question and more of a plan. I didn't have a ring yet, but I had already started thinking about it. I was saving money. I had even talked to one of her friends about what kind of jewelry she liked. That's what makes what happened so difficult to explain. Because if you looked at us from the outside, nobody would have thought anything was wrong. Even Rachel's friends thought we were one of those couples who would probably be together forever. Then slowly, things started changing. Not dramatically. That's the thing. If she had suddenly become a completely different person, maybe I would have noticed. But it happened gradually. So gradually that every individual moment had an explanation. The first thing was her phone. Rachel had never been someone who was glued to her phone. She used it, obviously. Everyone does. But she wasn't constantly checking it. Then one day, I noticed she started keeping it face down. Again, not a huge deal. Some people just do that. But then I noticed she started taking it with her everywhere. Even around the apartment. If she went to the kitchen, the phone went with her. If she went to the bathroom, the phone went with her. At first, I actually laughed about it. I joked that she was becoming addicted to her phone. She smiled and said she was just trying to be better about responding to people. That made sense. I didn't question it. A few weeks later, she started staying later at work. Rachel worked in marketing for a company that had occasional deadlines. So when she told me she had to stay late, I believed her. I didn't want to be the boyfriend who complained about someone's job. I knew careers mattered. I supported her. Sometimes she would come home at 9 or 10 at night. She would apologize. She would say she hated being there so late. And I believed her. Because why wouldn't I? The person I loved was telling me something. I had no reason to assume she was lying. The first time I really felt something was wrong was when she canceled plans with me. It was our anniversary. Not a huge anniversary. Just 4 years together. But we always celebrated those things. I had made reservations at a restaurant we had wanted to try for months. That afternoon, she texted me. She said something came up at work. She said she felt terrible. I remember staring at the message. I was disappointed, but I wasn't angry. Work happens. Things come up. I told her it was okay and that we could go another night. She responded with a heart emoji. That was it. That night, I ate dinner alone. I remember feeling weirdly embarrassed. Not angry, just embarrassed. Like I was sitting at a restaurant by myself while everyone around me was celebrating something with someone else. When Rachel got home, she hugged me and apologized. She said she had been overwhelmed. I told her it was okay, because that's what I always did. I made things okay. A few days later, she surprised me by bringing home my favorite dessert. She said she wanted to make up for missing our anniversary. And honestly, it worked. That's how easy it was for me to ignore things. A small gesture from her could erase weeks of doubt. Because I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. The next few months continued like that. Small changes. Small moments. Nothing big enough to confront. She became more private. She spent more time on social media. She started dressing differently when she went out. She suddenly cared much more about how she looked. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But every time I started questioning it, I talked myself out of it. Maybe she was just trying new things. Maybe she was focusing more on herself. Maybe I was being insecure. Then one night, something happened that I still think about. Rachel and I were sitting on the couch watching television. She was scrolling through her phone. I wasn't paying attention until I noticed her smile. It wasn't just a normal smile. It was the kind of smile someone has when they see a message they really like. She quickly locked her phone when she noticed me looking. I didn't say anything. I just watched the show, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Later that night, I asked casually, "Who was making you smile earlier?" She looked confused. "What? Your phone." She laughed. Oh, nobody. Just a friend. I asked who. She paused, only for a second, but I noticed. Then she said a name I didn't recognize. Tyler. I asked how she knew Tyler. She said he was someone from work. A co-worker. Nothing more. I accepted the answer. Because again, there was nothing proving otherwise. A co-worker wasn't suspicious. A smile wasn't suspicious. A phone wasn't suspicious. Everything was explainable. Until it wasn't. About 2 months later, Rachel told me she was going on a weekend trip with some coworkers. It wasn't unusual. Her company occasionally did team events. She said they were renting a cabin. She invited me at first, but then said it was probably better if it was just coworkers. That bothered me slightly. Not because I needed to go everywhere with her, but because she had always included me before. Still, I told her to have fun. The day she left, she kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me. I said it back. I remember watching her drive away and thinking how lucky I was, which makes what I found afterward even harder. Because while she was gone, I found something completely by accident. Something I was never supposed to see. I wasn't searching. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a charger. That's all. Rachel had left one of her bags in the closet. When I moved it, something fell out. A receipt. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Then I looked closer. It was from a hotel. Not a cabin. A hotel. The date was from the same weekend she had supposedly been staying with coworkers. I stood there holding that receipt for several minutes, trying to find another explanation. Maybe the team event changed locations. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe there was some innocent reason. But deep down, I already knew. The worst part wasn't the receipt. The worst part was how quickly my mind started defending her. Because even when the evidence was sitting right in front of me, part of me still wanted to protect the person who might have hurt me. I put the receipt back. I waited until she came home. And for the first time in our relationship, I started paying attention. Not as a boyfriend. Not as someone who trusted her. But as someone trying to figure out if the person I loved had been living a completely different life behind my back. When Rachel came home that Sunday night, I immediately knew something was different. Not because she looked guilty. Not because she acted nervous. Honestly, she seemed completely normal. That was almost worse. She walked through the door carrying her bag, smiled at me, and said she was exhausted. She kissed me on the cheek. She asked how my weekend was. She acted like nothing had happened. And I stood there trying to understand how someone could come home after potentially betraying you and act completely normal. I remember asking her about the trip. Not accusingly. Not angrily. I wanted to see what she would say. I wanted to give her a chance to explain. So, how was the cabin? She smiled. It was actually really fun. We should go there sometime. That sentence bothered me. Not because of what she said. Because of how easily she said it. There was no hesitation. No uncertainty. She had a story ready. A complete story. I asked what they did. She told me about hiking, cooking, playing games. The usual things people do on a weekend trip. Every answer came naturally. And that was the moment I realized something that still bothers me. Rachel wasn't just hiding something. She was comfortable hiding something. She had practiced. She had built a version of events and lived inside it. That night, I barely slept. I laid in bed next to her while she slept peacefully. I kept thinking about the receipt, the hotel, the fact that she had looked me in the eyes before leaving and told me she loved me. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. I really did. So the next day, I made a decision. I wasn't going to accuse her. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to find out the truth. I started with something simple. I checked the company event. Not because I was trying to stalk her. I just wanted to confirm what she told me. Her company posted pictures from events sometimes. They had a social media page. I searched through it, and almost immediately, I found something that made my stomach drop. There was a picture from that weekend. A group photo. Employees standing outside a restaurant. I recognized a few people, but Rachel wasn't there. Neither was Tyler. I stared at that picture for a long time, because suddenly the hotel receipt wasn't just suspicious. It was evidence. She hadn't gone on a company trip. She had lied. The hardest part was realizing that this wasn't about whether she cheated. I already knew something was wrong. The question was how long, and with who. That night, I waited until she got home. I watched her walk through the door. The same person I had loved for 4 years. The same person I had planned a future with. And I realized I didn't know who I was looking at anymore. After dinner, we sat on the couch. The entire time, I was thinking about how to start the conversation. There isn't a good way to ask someone if they've been cheating. There isn't a perfect sentence. Eventually, I just said it. Who is Tyler? The second I said his name, something changed. It was quick, almost invisible, but I saw it. Her face changed, only for a moment. Then she recovered. Why are you asking? That answer told me more than anything else could have. She didn't say, who? She didn't laugh. She didn't say I was being ridiculous. She asked why. I looked at her. Because I found something. She became quiet. What did you find? I told her about the receipt. I told her about the company pictures. I watched her expression change slowly. First confusion, then worry, then realization. She knew. She knew she couldn't explain it away. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then she started crying, and I remember feeling something strange. I thought I would feel anger. I thought I would feel rage. Instead, I just felt tired, completely exhausted. She admitted it. She admitted that Tyler was someone from work. But she didn't admit everything immediately. She tried to minimize it. She said they were just friends at first. She said it happened gradually. She said she never planned for it to become anything. I had heard those explanations before. Everyone says the same things. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was confused. But the problem is that cheating doesn't just happen. A person makes hundreds of choices before they get there. You choose to hide messages. You choose to delete conversations. You choose to lie about where you are. You choose to keep coming home and pretending everything is okay. Those aren't accidents. Those are decisions. I asked her how long. She looked down, and that pause destroyed me, because I knew whatever number she gave me was going to hurt. 8 months. 8 months. Almost a year. 8 months of me believing we were building a future. 8 months of her having another relationship. I asked if she loved him. She didn't answer. And honestly, that was answer enough. I asked if she was planning on leaving me. She said no. That confused me more than anything. Then why? She cried. She said she didn't know. She said she still loved me. She said she was sorry. But I couldn't understand how both things could be true. How could someone love you and still repeatedly choose to hurt you? I asked about the weekend trip. She finally admitted it wasn't a work trip. It was just them, a weekend together. She said Tyler wanted them to figure out what they were. That sentence still makes me angry, because while they were figuring out what they were, I was sitting at home thinking I was in a committed relationship. She had apparently been deciding between two lives, and I didn't even know there was another option. The next few days were the strangest days of my life. We were still technically together, but everything felt different. I looked at her differently. Every memory felt questionable. Every moment I thought was real suddenly had a question mark attached to it. I started wondering about everything. Was she actually working late? Was she really with friends? Were there other trips? Other lies? Other people? That was the part that broke me. Not just what I knew. Well, I didn't know. Because once someone proves they can hide something that big, you start questioning everything. Rachel wanted to fix things. She said she would quit her job. She said she would cut Tyler out completely. She said she would do anything. But I realized something. I didn't know if I wanted to fix the relationship. I wanted the relationship I thought I had. But that relationship didn't exist anymore. The person I missed wasn't Rachel. It was the version of Rachel I believed in. A few weeks later, I moved out. I stayed with my brother while I figured out what I wanted. During that time, Rachel continued reaching out. Some days she apologized. Some days she was angry. She said I was giving up too easily. That one hurt, because from her perspective, maybe it felt like I was leaving over one mistake. But from my perspective, I wasn't leaving over one mistake. I was leaving over 8 months of choices. Eventually, I found out more. A mutual friend told me that Rachel and Tyler had actually been talking before I noticed anything. Not physically, but emotionally. They'd gotten close months earlier. She had someone else she was turning to before I even knew there was a problem. That information made everything click. The relationship didn't suddenly change. It had been changing slowly. I just didn't know why. About 6 months after we broke up, I saw Rachel again. We ran into each other at a grocery store. It was awkward. We stood there talking for a few minutes. She looked different. Not physically, just different. Like someone who knew they had lost something. She apologized again. She said she hoped someday I could forgive her. I told her I didn't hate her. And that was true. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want her to suffer. I just accepted that sometimes people can be important parts of your life and still become people you can't keep in it. The strangest thing about the whole situation is that I still think about the good memories. I still remember our first date. I still remember adopting our dog. I still remember the conversations about our future. Those moments happened. They were real, but they belonged to a relationship that no longer existed. I think that's the hardest part about betrayal. It's not just losing a person. It's losing the reality you built around that person. You lose the future you imagined. You lose the confidence you had in your own judgment. You start wondering how someone could stand beside you every day while hiding something so important. I don't think I'll ever fully understand why Rachel did what she did. Maybe she doesn't understand either. But I learned something from that experience. Trust is one of the most important things you can give someone. But trust doesn't mean ignoring every feeling you have. Sometimes your instincts notice things before your mind is ready to accept them. And sometimes the person who says they love you the most is also the person capable of hurting you in ways you never thought possible. I always thought cheating stories were simple. Someone makes a mistake. Someone gets caught. A relationship falls apart. That's how people usually describe it. But the reality is that most betrayals don't happen in one dramatic moment. They happen slowly. They happen through small choices. A deleted message. A strange excuse. A change in someone's behavior that you notice, but convince yourself isn't important. The hardest part about being betrayed isn't always finding out what happened. Sometimes the hardest part is realizing how long someone was able to hide it from you. For almost 2 years, I believed I was in the happiest relationship of my life. I thought I had found the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. I thought I knew everything about her. I knew her favorite foods. I knew the little things that annoyed her. I knew the songs she skipped every time they came on. I knew how she liked her coffee. I knew what she did when she was stressed. I knew the way she would laugh when she was trying not to laugh. I knew all of these tiny details that make you believe you truly know someone. What I didn't know was that while I was building a future with her, she was creating a completely separate life that I knew nothing about. My name is Ryan, and this happened when I was 31 years old. At the time, I had been dating my girlfriend, Chloe, for almost 4 years. We met in a way that honestly felt pretty ordinary. There wasn't some crazy story behind it. We didn't meet during a vacation or have some unbelievable coincidence. We met through work. We worked in different departments of the same company, and for the first few months, we barely talked. She was the person who always seemed busy. She was organized, confident, and the type of person who always looked like she knew exactly what she was doing. I was the opposite. I was more relaxed. I liked to joke around. I wasn't the type of person who had everything planned out. Somehow, though, we balanced each other. Our first real conversation happened during a company event. Everyone was supposed to stay for a few hours after work, but most people were trying to leave as quickly as possible. I was standing outside near the parking lot pretending to answer emails because I didn't want to participate in awkward small talk. That's when Chloe walked over and asked why I was hiding. I laughed and told her I wasn't hiding. She looked at me and said, "You're literally standing behind a tree." That was the first time we really talked. From there, things moved naturally. We started getting lunch together. Then we started hanging out after work. Then suddenly months had passed, and we were basically inseparable. The relationship was easy. That's what I loved about it. There wasn't constant drama. There weren't games. I had been in relationships before where I felt like I was always trying to figure out where I stood. With Chloe, I didn't feel that way. She made me feel secure. She talked about the future. She talked about us moving in together. She even joked about what kind of house we would eventually buy. Looking back, those conversations are what made what happened later hurt so much. Because I wasn't just losing a girlfriend. I was losing a future I thought was guaranteed. About a year into our relationship, we moved in together. It wasn't a huge place, just a small apartment. But to us, it felt like a major step. We had our routines. I would usually wake up earlier because I started work before her. She would sleep a little longer and complain that mornings were unfair. Every Friday night, we would order food and watch a movie. Every Sunday, we would go grocery shopping together. It sounds boring, but honestly, those boring moments were my favorite. I never needed some exciting life. I just liked having someone to share normal days with. For the first couple of years, everything was great. Then slowly, things started changing. Not enough that I immediately thought something was wrong. That's important, because if someone suddenly changes overnight, it's easy to notice. But when someone changes little by little, your brain creates explanations. You make excuses for them. You tell yourself they're stressed, they're tired, they're busy. Anything except the truth. The first thing I noticed was that Chloe became protective of her phone. Before, her phone was just her phone. She would leave it on the counter. She would ask me to answer messages if she was cooking. Sometimes she would even hand it to me to show me something. That changed. Suddenly, her phone was always with her. If she went to the bathroom, the phone went with her. If she went into another room, the phone went with her. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Everyone becomes more private sometimes. But then I noticed she started putting it face down. Everywhere. The kitchen counter, the coffee table, the nightstand. Anywhere we were sitting together, the screen was hidden. I remember one night asking casually, "Why do you always put your phone upside down now?" She looked at me and laughed. She said, "Because notifications are annoying." It was such a normal answer, and maybe it was true, but something about it bothered me. Not enough to confront her, just enough that I noticed. A few weeks later, she started spending more time away from home. Again, nothing extreme. She didn't disappear. She didn't come home hours later every night. It was small. She started going out with friends more. She started having more work events. She started saying she needed time alone. And honestly, I understood that. Relationships shouldn't mean losing your independence. I never wanted to be the person who controlled where my partner went. So I tried to be supportive. If she wanted a night out with friends, I encouraged it. If she wanted to focus on work, I supported it. But eventually, I started feeling like I was the only person trying to maintain the relationship. The little things changed. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped being curious about things happening in my life. Conversations became shorter. She seemed distracted. Sometimes we would sit on the couch together, and it felt like she wasn't really there. She was physically beside me, but mentally somewhere else. One night, I asked if everything was okay. I remember exactly how that conversation went. We were sitting in bed. The room was dark. The only light was coming from the television. I asked, "Are you happy?" She looked surprised, like she wasn't expecting the question. Then she said, "Of course I am." I asked, "Are you sure?" She got defensive. She asked why I was asking. I told her I just felt like something had changed. She immediately told me I was overthinking, that I was creating problems, that nothing was wrong, and maybe part of me wanted to believe her, because the alternative was painful. The alternative was admitting the person I trusted might be pulling away. So I apologized. I told her I was probably just stressed, and we moved on. But things didn't really get better. They just became harder to ignore. A few months later, something happened that I still think about. I was cleaning the apartment while Chloe was at work. Nothing unusual, just a normal weekend. While organizing some paperwork on the desk, I found a receipt. It was from a restaurant, a nice restaurant, the kind of place you don't casually stop by. The date was from the previous week. I remember that night, because Chloe had told me she was working late. She came home around 10 p.m. and apologized because she couldn't spend time with me. I remember telling her it was fine. I remember making dinner for myself. I remember watching television alone. But according to the receipt, she wasn't working. She was at a restaurant. The first thought that entered my mind was that there had to be an explanation. Maybe she went with co-workers. Maybe it was a business dinner. Maybe she forgot to mention it. I didn't immediately assume cheating. I wasn't looking for reasons to accuse her. So when she got home, I asked casually, "Hey, did you go out to eat last week?" She froze, only for a second, but I saw it. She said, "What do you mean?" I held up the receipt. "I found this." She looked at it, then said, "Oh, yeah, I forgot about that." I asked who she went with. She said, "People from work." I asked why she didn't mention it. She said, "I don't know. It wasn't a big deal. Maybe that answer should have satisfied me. But it didn't, because suddenly I was remembering every little thing. The phone, the distance, the excuses, the changes. I wasn't certain she was cheating, but for the first time, I admitted to myself that something might actually be wrong. And once that thought entered my mind, I couldn't get it out. Once you start questioning something you desperately want to ignore, it's almost impossible to go back. That was the hardest part. Before that moment, I could explain everything away. The phone, the late nights, the distance, the strange behavior. I had an answer for all of it. But after seeing that receipt and watching Chloe hesitate, something changed. I wasn't accusing her. I wasn't even angry yet. I just had this feeling that there was a part of her life I wasn't seeing. And the worst feeling in the world is realizing the person closest to you might be keeping you outside of their reality. For the next few weeks, I tried not to act differently. I didn't want to become paranoid. I didn't want to be the person who checked every detail of someone's life looking for evidence. I still love Chloe. That was the problem. When you care about someone, you don't want to believe the worst about them. You want an innocent explanation. You want to be wrong. I wanted to discover that I was just being insecure. I wanted her to laugh and tell me I was crazy for ever doubting her. But instead, more things started happening. Small things. Things that individually meant nothing, but together created a picture I couldn't ignore. One night, Chloe was getting ready to go out with a friend. She was standing in front of the mirror doing her hair. I was sitting on the bed watching television. She looked happier than she had in months. That bothered me. Not because she looked good. I wanted her to feel good. But because I couldn't remember the last time she looked that excited to spend time with me. I asked, "Who are you meeting again?" She said, "Just Sarah." Sarah was one of her friends from work. I had met her a few times. I didn't think anything of it. Then about an hour after Chloe left, I received a message from Sarah. It was completely random. She asked, "Hey, did Chloe say anything about tonight?" I thought that was strange. I replied, "No, why?" She took a while to respond. Then she said, "Never mind." That was it. A few minutes later, she sent another message. "Actually, don't worry about it." I stare at my phone. That conversation bothered me. Not because it proved anything. It didn't. But because it felt like Sarah almost said something and then stopped herself. The next morning, I asked Chloe about it. I tried to sound casual. "Did Sarah text you last night?" Immediately, Chloe looked confused. "No. Why?" I told her what happened. She said, "That's weird." Then she changed the subject. That was becoming a pattern. Whenever something uncomfortable came up, the conversation would disappear. A few weeks later, I made a decision. I needed to know what was happening. Not because I wanted to catch her, because living in uncertainty was destroying me. I started paying attention. Not obsessively, just enough. And what I noticed was that Chloe had another routine. There were certain times when she would disappear. Usually during lunch breaks. Usually after work. Usually when she thought I wasn't paying attention. One day, she left her laptop open on the kitchen table. I wasn't trying to look. I want to make that clear. I wasn't searching through her things. But when I walked past, I noticed an email notification. It wasn't from someone named John or anything obvious. It was just an email address I didn't recognize. The subject line said, "Last night was amazing." I stopped. I felt my entire body go cold. I stood there for several seconds. I knew what I was looking at, but my brain was still trying to reject it. Because once you see something like that, there is no going back. I opened the email and immediately regretted it. The messages weren't romantic in a way that left room for interpretation. They were personal, intimate. There were conversations about places they had been, things they had done together, plans they had made. And the worst part was the timeline. It wasn't recent. It had been going on for almost a year. Almost a year. That was the part one couldn't understand. I wasn't discovering a mistake. I wasn't discovering one bad decision. I was discovering an entire second relationship. While I was sitting at home waiting for her, while I was believing we were building a future, she was living another life. I didn't read everything. I couldn't. After a certain point, it became too much. I closed the laptop. I walked outside. I don't even remember how long I was gone. I just walked, because I didn't know what else to do. I felt angry. I felt embarrassed. I felt stupid. But more than anything, I felt confused. How could someone look at you every day and lie so easily? How could someone tell you they love you while hiding something that huge? When I came home, Chloe was sitting on the couch. She immediately knew something was wrong. She asked, "What's going on?" I didn't yell. I didn't throw accusations. I just asked, "Who is Michael?" The look on her face answered everything. She didn't ask who Michael was. She didn't say she didn't know anyone named Michael. She just went silent. That silence hurt more than anything, because it confirmed it. After almost a minute, she said, "I can explain." I remember laughing. Not because it was funny, because I didn't know what else to do. Everyone says they want an explanation when something like this happens. But the truth is, sometimes an explanation doesn't make things better. Sometimes it just gives you more details about how someone hurt you. I asked her how long. She said, "Almost a year." I felt like I couldn't breathe. A year. She had spent a year lying to me. I asked if she loved him. She started crying. She said, "It wasn't supposed to happen." That sentence made me angry, because every person who cheats says some version of that. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just happened, like they weren't involved in every choice that led there. I asked her when she planned on telling me. She didn't answer. And that told me everything. She wasn't going to tell me. I would have lived my entire life without knowing. That realization hurt more than the cheating itself. The fact that she was comfortable letting me continue believing a lie. Over the next few days, everything came out. Michael was someone she met through work. Someone she claimed started as a friendship. She said she never intended for it to become what it did. She said she felt disconnected from me. She said she felt like we were becoming different people. Maybe some of that was true. Maybe our relationship had problems. Every relationship does. But there was something I couldn't accept. Problems don't force someone to betray you. You choose how you handle problems. You talk. You communicate. You leave if you have to. You don't secretly build another relationship while pretending everything is fine. I moved out a few weeks later. The apartment felt strange after that. Every room had memories attached to it. The kitchen where we cooked together. The couch where we watched movies. The bedroom where we talked about our future. It was like walking through a life that didn't exist anymore. Chloe tried reaching out several times. At first, she wanted to fix things. She said she made a mistake. She said she still loved me. But I couldn't get past the trust. Because trust isn't just believing someone won't cheat. It's believing the reality they show you is real. And mine wasn't. Eventually, I learned Michael and Chloe didn't stay together. Apparently, once the excitement disappeared and reality set in, things weren't as perfect as she imagined. I never felt happy about that. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want her to suffer. I just wanted to move on. Years later, I still think about that relationship. Not every day, not with anger, mostly with disbelief. Because the person I thought I knew better than anyone was someone I only knew the version she showed me. And I think that's what hurts the most about betrayal. It's not just losing someone. It's realizing you were in a completely different relationship than they were. You were building a future. They were hiding a secret. And sometimes the truth doesn't destroy your life because of what happened. It destroys your life because it changes everything you thought you understood. I used to think that if someone wanted to hurt your relationship, it would be obvious. I imagine it would be some dramatic situation where someone openly tried to get between two people. Someone who made their intentions clear. Someone who was easy to recognize as a threat. I never imagined the person trying to destroy my relationship would be the person I trusted the most. My best friend. Looking back now, there were signs. There were so many signs. The strange comments. The unnecessary questions. The way he always seemed to know exactly when my girlfriend and I were having problems. But at the time, I didn't see any of it. Because when someone has been part of your life for years, your brain automatically gives them the benefit of the doubt. You don't look at your best friend and think, this person might secretly be working against me. You look at them and think, they know me better than anyone. That was my mistake. My name is Daniel, and this happened about 4 years ago when I was in my late 20s. At that point in my life, I had known my best friend Marcus for almost 10 years. We met during college. Neither of us really fit into the social scene there. We weren't the type of people who went out every weekend or try to be the center of attention. We were both pretty quiet. We liked video games, movies, sports, and just hanging out without needing a big group around us. Over time, that friendship became more like family. Marcus was the person I called when something good happened. He was the person I called when something bad happened. When my grandfather passed away, he was one of the first people in my house. When I got my first real job after college, he was the person I celebrated with. When I was struggling financially, he was the person who would invite me over for dinner because he knew I didn't want to admit I was having trouble. That's the kind of friendship we had, or at least that's what I thought. A few years after college, I met Emily. We met at a friend's birthday party. I almost didn't go. I had just gotten out of a relationship that ended badly, and honestly, I wasn't interested in dating again. I remember Marcus convincing me to go. He told me I needed to stop staying home every weekend and actually meet people. At the party, Emily and I started talking. Nothing dramatic happened. There wasn't some movie moment where we immediately knew we were meant to be together. We just clicked. We had similar humor. We liked the same music. We could talk for hours without it feeling forced. A few weeks later, we went on our first date. A year later, we were living together. Looking back, Emily was one of the best things that ever happened to me. She was patient. She was supportive. She understood me in ways most people didn't. And Marcus loved that. At least, that's what I believed. When I first introduced them, they got along immediately. That was something I actually appreciated. A lot of people are uncomfortable when their best friend meets their partner. They worry about jealousy or awkwardness. But Marcus and Emily seemed to become friends almost instantly. They joked around. They had conversations without me. They shared similar interests. I remember being happy about it. I thought it meant the two most important people in my life could get along. I never considered that it could become a problem. The first strange thing happened about 6 months after Emily and I started dating. Marcus made a comment that seemed harmless. We were sitting at a bar watching a basketball game. Emily wasn't there. We were just hanging out like we normally did. Out of nowhere, Marcus said, "You're lucky she puts up with you." I laughed. I thought he was joking. What does that mean? He shrugged. Nothing. I'm just saying you're not exactly the easiest person to date. I laughed again. Because honestly, he wasn't completely wrong. I could be stubborn. I overthought things. I wasn't perfect, so I didn't think much about it. But then similar comments started happening more often. If Emily and I disagreed about something, Marcus would immediately take her side. At first, I thought it was funny. I even joked that he was becoming her best friend instead of mine. But eventually it started feeling different. One night, Emily and I had an argument about money. Nothing serious, just a normal couple disagreement. We worked through it. The next day, Marcus called me. The first thing he asked was, "Are you guys okay?" I was confused. "Yeah, what?" He paused, then said, "I don't know." Emily seemed upset yesterday. That bothered me. Not because he knew we argued. Couples talk. That's normal. But because I hadn't told him. Emily hadn't told him. At least I didn't think she had. I asked him how he knew. He said, "Oh, I just figured something was wrong." I let it go, but it stuck in my mind. A few weeks later, Emily and I had another disagreement. This time it was about my work schedule. Again, nothing major. We talked. We apologized. Everything was fine. Then Marcus called me. Same thing. Everything good with Emily? I remember sitting there thinking, why does he keep knowing this? I asked Emily if she had talked to him. She looked confused. No, why would I? That was the first moment where something felt genuinely strange. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't want to be that person. I trusted both of them. So I convinced myself there had to be a normal explanation. Maybe Marcus was just observant. Maybe Emily mentioned something without realizing it. Maybe I was overthinking. That became my pattern. Every time something felt wrong, I found a reason to ignore it. Because the alternative was too uncomfortable. The alternative was admitting that someone I loved might not have my best interests in mind. A few months passed. Then things started getting worse. Marcus began making comments about my relationship when Emily wasn't around. Small comments. The kind that are easy to dismiss. He would say things like, "Are you sure she's really happy?" Or, "Sometimes people stay in relationships because they're comfortable." Or, "Have you ever thought maybe you're holding her back?" At first, I thought he was just giving advice. A good friend is supposed to be honest with you. But eventually, I noticed something. He never said anything positive. Never. If I told him Emily did something thoughtful, he would find a reason to minimize it. If I told him we had a great weekend together, he would bring up something negative. It was always the same. He wasn't helping me improve my relationship. He was making me question it. I started noticing another strange pattern. Whenever Marcus and Emily were together, he acted differently. Not obviously. Nothing that would make someone immediately suspicious. But there was a confidence there. A comfort level that felt strange. He would tease her more. He would make inside jokes. Sometimes they would talk about things I wasn't part of. Again, maybe that sounds harmless. Friends can become friends. But there was something about it that bothered me. I couldn't explain it. It was just a feeling. And feelings are difficult because they don't come with evidence. A few months later, Emily and I had our biggest argument. It was over something stupid. Honestly, I don't even remember the exact details anymore. I just remember both of us being stressed. We went to bed angry. The next morning, she was still upset. I went to work. That afternoon, I got a message from Marcus. He said, "Are you guys still fighting?" I stare at my phone. Again, how'd he know? I asked him. His response was, "Emily told me." I immediately felt uncomfortable. Not angry, just confused. When I got home that night, I asked Emily, "Did you talk to Marcus today?" She froze, only for a second, but I noticed. She said, "Yeah, I texted him." I asked why. She said she just needed someone to talk to. That answer bothered me more than I expected. Not because she talked to a friend. That's normal. But because Marcus was my best friend. The person who was supposed to support both of us. Not become the person she went to whenever we had problems. I didn't say anything at the time. I didn't want to seem controlling. I didn't want to make Emily feel like she couldn't talk to people. So I stayed quiet. And that was another mistake. Because while I was trying not to overreact, Marcus was becoming more involved in our relationship. And I didn't realize it until it was almost too late. The next few weeks were when everything started changing. I wish I could say there was one obvious moment where I realized what was happening. One single event where everything clicked. But that's not how it happened. The worst situations usually don't happen all at once. They build slowly. They happen through dozens of small moments that you ignore because each one individually doesn't seem important enough. That was exactly what happened with Marcus. After I found out Emily had been talking to him about our arguments, I started paying closer attention. Not because I wanted to spy on them. Not because I suddenly thought they were doing something horrible. I just couldn't shake the feeling that something about the situation wasn't right. The first thing I noticed was how often Marcus was messaging Emily. I wasn't looking through her phone. I wasn't checking her conversations. I wasn't trying to find evidence. It was just becoming obvious. Whenever we were sitting together watching television, her phone would light up. She would look down, smile, and respond. Again, that isn't automatically suspicious. People have friends. People talk. But eventually I noticed a pattern. Almost every time she received a message from Marcus, she would turn her phone away. Not dramatically. Not like someone trying to hide something. Just enough that I noticed. One night, we were eating dinner, and her phone buzzed. She immediately picked it up. I saw Marcus's name on the screen. She typed something quickly, then placed the phone face down. I didn't say anything, but something inside me sank. A few days later, Marcus invited me over to watch a game. Normally, I would have been excited. That was our thing. Every few weeks, we would hang out, order food, and watch sports. But this time felt different. Maybe because I was already suspicious. Maybe because I was starting to see things I ignored before. When I arrived, Marcus immediately started asking about Emily. Not me, not work, not anything else. Just Emily. How are things with her? I remember laughing awkwardly. Why do you always ask that? He looked confused. What do you mean? You always want to know how things are with Emily. He smiled. I care about you, man. That answer would have worked if it came from anyone else. But coming from him, it felt strange. I changed the subject. We watched the game. But the whole night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days later, something happened that made me question everything. I came home from work earlier than expected. Emily wasn't home. I texted her asking where she was. She replied that she was grabbing coffee with a friend. I didn't think much of it. Then about 20 minutes later, I saw a notification pop up on our shared tablet. It was connected to the same account she used on her phone. A message preview appeared. It was from Marcus. The message said, "Don't worry. I handled it." I stared at those words. I don't even know why. Maybe because they didn't make sense. Handled what? Why was Marcus saying that? I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was wrong. But at that moment, my curiosity got the better of me. I opened the conversation and immediately wished I hadn't. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. There weren't hundreds of messages. There wasn't some obvious confession. It was worse, because it looked normal. That was the most disturbing part. They had been talking for months. Not about random things. About me. About my relationship. About our arguments. About my personality. Marcus had been telling Emily things like I was too immature. That I didn't appreciate her enough. That she deserved someone who understood her. And Emily wasn't shutting it down. She was responding. At first, I tried to convince myself it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe they were just talking. Maybe Marcus was trying to help. Maybe I was misunderstanding. Then I saw a message from Emily. She wrote, "Sometimes I wonder if you're right." I felt sick. Not angry. Not at first. Just completely empty. Because the person I trusted most had been slowly planting doubts in my relationship. And the person I loved was listening. I kept scrolling. The conversation went back months. Marcus had apparently been telling her that he always thought we weren't a good match. That he didn't understand why she stayed with me. That he thought she was settling. Then I saw something that completely changed how I viewed everything. A message from Marcus. He said, "If you ever decide you want someone who actually understands you, you know who to call." I remember sitting there staring at the screen, because suddenly every strange comment made sense. Every time he questioned my relationship, every time he took her side, every time he made me feel like I wasn't good enough. It wasn't advice. It wasn't concern. It was intentional. He was trying to create problems between us. I put the tablet down. I didn't confront Emily immediately. I know some people might think that's strange, but my mind was completely overwhelmed. I needed time to process what I had just seen. The hardest part wasn't even what Marcus did. It was realizing that Emily allowed it. Because someone could try to interfere in your relationship. That happens. But the person you love has to let them in. They have to participate. And that's what hurt the most. That night, Emily came home around an hour later. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "What's going on?" I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just asked, "How long have you been talking to Marcus about our relationship?" Her expression changed. Only slightly. But enough. She knew. At first, she denied it. She said they were just friends. She said she was only venting. She said I was making it into something it wasn't. I asked her why Marcus thought he had the right to tell her she deserved someone better. She didn't answer. I asked her why she never told me he was saying those things. Still nothing. Eventually, she sat down, and that's when she admitted something that hurt even more. She said Marcus had always made her feel understood. She said he listened when she was upset. She said she knew he cared about her. I remember asking, "Do you hear yourself?" Because that's when I realized how far things had gone. She wasn't just defending him. She was emotionally attached to him. Maybe there had been no physical cheating. Maybe they never crossed that line. But the trust was already broken. I left that night. I stayed with my brother for a few days. I needed space. I needed to figure out what I was feeling. And during those few days, Marcus called me repeatedly. I ignored him. Eventually, he sent me a message. It said, "You're misunderstanding everything." I almost laughed when I saw it, because that's exactly what people say when they know they've been caught. I finally answered. I asked him one question. "Why were you trying to convince my girlfriend to leave me?" There was a long pause. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "Because I knew she wasn't happy." That answer made me angry. Not because he cared about her, because he genuinely believed he had the right. I asked him, "And what exactly did you think was going to happen?" He didn't answer, but I think we both knew. He wanted to be the person she went to, the person she trusted, the person she depended on. He didn't want to help my relationship. He wanted to replace me. I eventually ended things with Emily. That was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. Not because I thought she was perfect. She wasn't. But because losing her also meant losing the future I imagined. We had built a life together. We had plans, and suddenly all of that was gone. As for Marcus, I never spoke to him again. I heard from mutual friends that he tried to explain himself. Some people believed him. Some people thought I overreacted. I honestly stopped caring. Because the people who weren't there don't understand what it feels like to realize someone you trusted spent months trying to slowly destroy something important to you. The strangest part is that Marcus and I had been friends for almost 10 years. 10 years of memories. 10 years of trust. And all it took was one person deciding they wanted something I had. I still think about that sometimes. Not because I miss him, but because it changed how I see people. Before that happened, I believed betrayal was always obvious. I thought you would know when someone was against you. But sometimes the person who causes the most damage is the person standing closest to you. The person giving you advice. The person telling you they care. The person you never think you have to question. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because sometimes the person trying to take something from you isn't a stranger. Sometimes they're the person you invited into your life.